Now, you all know that there's a special place in my heart for tragic artists, and one of the most tragic may be Oscar Wilde. Today, he may be an acclaimed author, LGBTQ+ icon, and just overall archetypal sassy gay friend, but let's take a look at his life. Hello, welcome to Nerdy and Quirky. Here's some cool history. On October 16th, 1854, Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde was born in Ireland to an interesting family. His father was a knighted doctor and philanthropist who opened a hospital out of his own wallet to treat the poor. His mother, on the other hand, was a poet who frequently held parties with fellow literati, parties which Wilde was allowed to attend, but only to listen. And maybe it was growing up in that sort of environment, but Wilde became a phenomenal student. He specialized in Greek and Roman studies and got first in his year for a few years over and won some scholarships and awards. But he wasn't quite the model student since he pursued the aesthetic movement, before it became a meme. Basically, the aesthetic movement is the pursuit of beauty for beauty's sake. Not politics, not agenda, just beauty. This meant Wilde wore his hair long, his robes fur-lined, and his rooms fabulous. Eventually, he graduated from Oxford in 1878, and in 1881, he released his first poetry collection, Poems. What a creative name. The general consensus was that it was alright. Punch magazine let out a mini diss track saying, "Aesthete of aesthetes, what's in a name? The poet is wild, but his poetry's tame." Wicca what? Okay, so Wilde's main gig for a while was lecturing. He toured America and Western Europe talking about aestheticism and interior design. During one lecture, he met Constance Lloyd, whom he married in 1884, and with whom he had 2 sons. But it was after that second son when Wilde met Robbie Ross, an out and proud gay Canadian who was determined to seduce Wilde, which turned out to be done super easily. So now we have Wilde, a husband and a father with a male mistress. A master? A mattress? Is there a word for that? No? Okay, blame the patriarchy, I guess. Anyway, in 1888, Wilde took up the post as editor-in-chief for the Ladies' World magazine because he needed a more grounded income to support his family. Now, the magazine was basically Vogue, focusing on high-class women's fashion, but it transformed under Wilde's control very literally since he changed the name to The Woman's World magazine and introduced the wild concept of focusing more on what women think and feel. So basically, Teen Vogue. But we all know that Wilde was not the type for a desk job. He eventually just stopped showing up for work and was let go in 1889. But have no fear, this signaled the true start of his career. The next few years proved to be his most fruitful. He reached the peak of his fame as a London author and playwright. He wrote The Picture of Dorian Gray, Lady Windermere's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, The Importance of Being Earnest, and alright, since we're already talking about this excellent body of work, it's sponsor time! This video was sponsored by Audible. Audible is the leading provider of audiobooks and other ear snacks on the internet. Now, I use Audible to get some reading, or in some cases, play listening to while I'm exercising because Audible has got this unmatched selection of content for you to check out. But if you are into Oscar Wilde or you want to get into Oscar Wilde, Audible has got a bunch of his works. I recommend his plays, especially The Importance of Being Earnest. It's a lot easier to consume plays as audiobooks than just like sitting alone being all of the parts in your head. You can listen to The Importance of Being Earnest or any book of your choice for free with a 30-day trial by signing up at audible.com/nerdyandquirky. And if you like it, a low-cost monthly membership gets you 1 free audiobook a month and 30% off anything extra. So start your free trial today at audible.com/nerdyandquirky. Okay, back to the video. So Wilde is at the peak of his career, and as a result, he is loaded, and he spent that money on his aesthetic lifestyle and male prostitutes. Let me explain. In 1891, Wilde was introduced to Sir Alfred Douglas, also known as Bosie, and he fell in love. In turn, Bosie introduced Wilde to the underground world of male prostitutes. Totally fair trade-off. Wilde would pretty woman them, enjoying the outrage it caused in proper Victorian society. But his heart wasn't really in it. The only Julia Roberts to his Richard Gere was Bosie. And this pretty woman analogy needs to end immediately. So Wilde and Bosie were lovers, and Bosie's dad was a douchebag. If you want to know just how much of a bro he was, he helped come up with the rules for modern boxing. And so he left a calling card at Wilde's house calling him a posing SOMDOMITE. Wait. If you think that sounds wrong, you'd be right, because my dude misspelled sodomite. In true internet hate comment fashion, he misspelled his insult. So Wilde, encouraged by Bosie and under the belief that nothing could go wrong, sued Bosie's dad for libel. Remember, this was back in the day when being homosexual was hella illegal. If Bosie's dad managed to prove that Wilde was gay, Wilde was done for. And then Wilde's aesthetic and outspoken lifestyle backfired, and he was found guilty of making young men gay. Like it was a superpower or something, just homosexualis patronum. So Wilde was sentenced to 2 years hard labor and was forced to sell his home, his furniture, the rights to all of his works just to pay back his creditors. And by the time he was released, he was exhausted and flat broke. Interestingly enough though, Wilde's wife never divorced him. She even visited him in prison, all in the hopes that he would return to their family, under the strict condition that he'd go straight. In all senses of the word. They never reunited. But what about Bosie, the catalyst of Wilde's downfall? Bosie lost interest in him and eventually became an outspoken homophobe and anti-Semite. And in his 1916 book, he called Wilde one of the most powerful forces for evil that has happened in Europe for the last 300 years, which is such a ridiculous statement. If you know anything about history, 17th to 20th century Europe had a lot worse people than a gay playwright. What you doing, Bosie? You good? Perhaps the only one to stay by Wilde's side through it all was Robbie Ross. He gave Wilde a home after prison, was with him when he died 3 years later, and made sure to keep Wilde's legacy alive even after the author's death by buying back the rights to all of his works. From the very start, Wilde's life was just loud and proud, which is what makes his death so much more tragic. It just seems like this unfamiliar, pathetic whimper, inappropriate to conclude a life so boldly lived. It doesn't seem fair. And it wasn't. But for all of the things done wrong to him, Wilde remained himself until the very end. His last words were, "My wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. One or the other of us has to go." Well, that was just some cool history on Oscar Wilde. Now, what about you guys? Who is your favorite author? Tell me down below. If you enjoyed this episode or you just want to support the show, consider hitting like, share, and subscribe. But either way, have a lovely day. Aesthetes of aesthetes, what's in the name? The poet may be wild, but his poetry's tame. What? What? Whoop! Should not pretend to rap while wearing a cardigan. I just look like a small school teacher.